A man dies on a beach. No name, no idea, not even a scratch on him. In his pocket, there's a scrap of paper with two words: Tamam Shud. It is finished. That was 1948, and we still don't know who killed him or why.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. Just search for The Michael Braa Show on Insta, Facebook, YouTube, or the KC CBS 47 Plus app.
Tonight, we're going to look at one of the most haunting cold cases of the 20th century. A case with no witnesses, no fingerprints, and no motive, but one that just refuses to be forgotten. They called him the Somerton Man. He was found fully dressed with polished shoes, lying against a sea well like he'd simply fallen asleep watching the ocean roll in. But no one ever came forward to claim him. No missing persons report matched, and the more investigators looked, the stranger it all became. Clothing with no tags, a cigarette perched on his collar, a book tossed in the back seat of a stranger's car, and inside that book, a code that no one's ever been able to crack. We're not going to crack it tonight. We're here to press it, to ask better questions, and to challenge what we think we know, and maybe give new life to something that was never meant to die quiet. I'm Michael Braa, this is the Somerton Man, and this is the Michael Braa Show. He was found just after dawn lying on Somerton Beach. Calm-looking face back against the seawall, and his legs crossed at the ankles like he'd simply dozed off watching the waves. But he wasn't asleep, he was dead. The first officer on the scene thought maybe it was heart failure, maybe a vagrant who had just laid down and never woke up. But this man didn't look like someone who was living rough. His shoes were polished, his suit was pressed, he was clean-shaven, clean-skinned, no signs of injury or violence. He looked composed. But right away, things started to feel off. He had no ID on him, no wallet, and not even a scrap of paper with his name on it. Every single clothing label cut out, carefully, deliberately, like someone didn't want him to be known. And something else, no hat. Now, that might not sound strange today, but in 1948 in Australia, a man in a full suit without a hat, well, that stood out. A gentleman didn't go in public without one, not unless he left with a hurry, or unless somebody else dressed him. When they searched his pockets, they found a few things. A used bus ticket, a train ticket to Henley Beach that had never been used, a metal comb, a pack of juicy fruit gum, matches, and a half-smoked cigarette tucked neatly behind his collar. Not in his hand, not in his mouth, just sitting there like it had been placed. Maybe by him, maybe not. Then came the autopsy. The pathologist could not find a cause of death. No trauma, no heart attack, no stroke. The organs, though, were congested, especially the liver. The stomach lining showed blood, and it all pointed to poisoning. But no poison was found. Nothing in the blood, nothing in the tissues. Whatever killed him, if it was poison, it left no trace. The last meal he'd eaten, a pastry, something like a meat pie, eaten about 3 hours before he died. But again, no toxins in the food. No signs of struggle. Just a man who quietly stopped living. Now the body gave a few more clues. He was probably in his mid-40s, about 5'11", strong calves, hands that didn't look like they'd done much labor. His toes were oddly wedge-shaped, like he wore tight shoes or danced or maybe even boxed, something that would have forced the foot into a narrow over time. Still, nobody came forward to claim him. No missing persons report matched, no fingerprint hits. His face was photographed and shared widely, and the coroner ordered a plaster bust. They buried him as a John Doe. That right there could have been the end of it. But then, weeks later, a sharp-eyed investigator noticed something strange in the waistband of the man's pants. A seam that didn't look factory sewn. So he pulled at it gently, and inside was a tiny hidden pocket. And in that pocket was a scrap of tightly rolled paper. No handwriting or smudge, just 2 words, printed in ornate Persian script. Tamam Shud. It is finished. That scrap, barely the size of a matchbook, would change everything. Police launched a wider search, and by pure chance, a local man walked into the station. He said he'd found something strange in the back seat of his car, a book someone had tossed through the window weeks earlier. It was a rare edition of the Rubaiyat Omar Khayyam. And on that book, a page missing, and handwritten code. 5 lines of letters that no one has ever fully explained, and a phone number. That number would lead to a woman who lived less than a mile from where the man was found. But that's the story of its own. The Adelaide police took this case pretty seriously, and they had to. It wasn't just a body on a beach. It was a body that refused to be identified. And in post-war world still haunted by spies, shifting borders, and quiet disappearances, this was more than just a curiosity. It was unsettling. From the beginning, they followed the book. Officers photographed the body in place, documenting everything he carried, and sent his clothing and personal effects to be examined. When nothing in his pockets turned up a name or a lead, they went public. His photo was circulated across the country. Sketches were mailed out to other police stations, but nobody recognized him. Back at the morgue, toxicologists were called in. The pathologist was convinced the man had been poisoned. Not violently, not with something crude like strychnine or arsenic, but something more subtle, a rare toxin, perhaps digitalis or tryptophan. Poisons that affect the heart but leave little behind. But even with that theory, testing at the time couldn't confirm anything. They couldn't find a trace. And without a cause of death, there was no murder case, no suspect to chase, just a man without a name and a puzzle that was starting to feel more deliberate than random. As weeks passed, the investigation slowed, but it didn't stop. When the Tamam Shud scrap was found in the hidden pocket, that discovery breathed new life into the case. Police sent out a press release describing the paper, and soon after, a man walked into the station with a strange claim. He said that several weeks earlier, he'd parked his car near Somerton Beach and later found a copy, the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, lying in his back seat. He thought nothing of it at the time and tossed it into the glove box. But now, hearing about the slip of paper, he decided to check the book, and sure enough, the final page was missing, torn clean out. It was a match. Inside the book, the investigators found more. They found a phone number, a faint impression of a code, 5 lines of seemingly random letters written on the back page. The phone number led to a woman named Jessica Thompson, a local nurse who lived just blocks from where the body had been found. Police decided to pay her a visit. According to the detectives, when they showed her the plaster bust of the man, she appeared visibly shaken. Some said she nearly fainted. But when asked if she knew him, she insisted she didn't. And she had said that she'd once owned a copy of the Rubaiyat, but had given it away years earlier. She claimed no knowledge of the code, and she had no idea why her unlisted phone number would be found in a book connected to the dead man. It was all, she said, just a strange coincidence. But even then, things didn't quite add up. Her son, years later, would suggest that Jessica had lied, that the man on the beach may have been his biological father, and that whatever happened in 1948 had been buried, literally and figuratively, to protect something. Now, to be clear, none of this is confirmed. No charges were ever filed. Jessica was never accused of wrongdoing. But her silence, her guarded answers, only added to the fire. The case drew attention beyond Australia. There were rumors that the British intelligence, even the FBI, had taken an interest, that the code in the book might be a cipher, that the man had been a courier or a defector or maybe a spy. After all, this was 1948. The Cold War was just beginning. Australia had a growing intelligence presence. Woomera, the missile testing range, was only a few hundred miles from Adelaide. If ever there was a time and place for quiet espionage, this was it. But without a name, without a cause of death, without anyone willing to talk, the investigation stalled. The leads faded and the story was buried in the back of the public's mind. For a while. But the mystery never really went away. And decades later, as technology caught up, the Somerton Man would come back into view, not with answers, but with more questions than ever.
Trust. It's hard to get and easy to lose. When the risk of loss is great and people are hurting, who do you trust? How about the people trusted by the biggest names in business, agriculture, and government? Atlanta's Private Investigations, building trust one case at a time.
I'm Michael, founder of Atlantis Private Investigations. Let's talk. When you need help, your answers are here.
Well, sure, I remember it like it was yesterday. I was going through a devastating divorce. That's hard already. Then my ex hid our money and tried to take the kids from me. My attorney suggested I call Atlantis Private Investigations. That was the turning point. Michael and his team got me the proof I needed to get my children back and secure our future.
I'm Michael from Atlantis Private Investigations. Let's talk. When you need help, your answers are here.
The world's smartest minds gave up on this code, but I've seen the internet solve crazier. Imagine a single page of numbers and letters so stubborn, it's mocked cryptographers for 76 years. Tonight, that code could land in your hands. Ready to crack history's most haunting riddle? Welcome to Kara's Corner, and we need your help. Back in 1948, an unidentified man, nicknamed the Somerton Man, washed up on an Australian beach. Sewn deep within his pocket, a scrap that read, Tamam Shud, Persian for it's finished. Police traced the phrase to a rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. On the book's back page, 5 lines of scrambled letters. No words, no numbers, no clear pattern. Military codebreakers tried. University teams tried, and Reddit still tries. Zero luck. The cipher is either a spy's dying whisper or the biggest inside joke ever printed and worn paperback. Here's why I'm betting on all of us. Golden State Killer. For 4 decades, his trail was ice cold. Then armchair genealogists uploaded DNA to GED match, connected distant cousins, and boom, Joseph D'Angelo was in cuffs by breakfast. Zodiac's 340 cipher, cracked in 2020, not even by the FBI, but by Aussie mathematician, a Virginia software engineer, and a Belgian code lover, all trading screen shares at 3 a.m. When thousands of minds swarm one puzzle, patterns pop, blind spots vanish, and every theory gets stress tests in minutes, not months. So here's the mission. Screenshot the cipher, or take a picture if you're watching it on TV. I'll flash it on the screen right now. Try everything. Post your progress and tag at the Michael Braa Show so our team can curate leads. Think you're not a code person? I don't care. One of the Zodiac sleuths works in tech. Another just loves puzzles. You don't need credentials, just curiosity. Every line you test moves the needle. Every dead end crossed off makes the next path clear. Let's do what professionals couldn't do and give the Somerton Man his final sentence. Literally. I look forward to working with you all. Thanks for coming to Kara's Corner, and I'll see you next time.
For decades, people have tried to explain what happened to the man on Somerton Beach. And not just to explain his death, but to understand his life, his identity, and his message. The problem is, each theory seems to open another door instead of closing one. The earliest and perhaps most straightforward explanation was suicide. Here was a man with no name, no belongings, and no one looking for him. He lives in a seaside city, walks out in the sand, and dies under the stars with a piece of poetry hidden in his pocket. And the final message, it is finished. Well, that sounds like a man making a statement, doesn't it? But even that theory starts to unravel the more you look at it. If this was suicide, where's the poison? The tests came up clean. And who hides a cryptic message in a secret pocket before they end their own life? Why strip every label from the clothes? Who brings a half-smoked cigarette and places it on their own collar? Suicide is often messy, impulsive, but this was methodical. It was almost clinical, and it raises another possibility. What if this wasn't self-inflicted? What if the man didn't erase his identity? What if someone else did? That's where the idea of espionage starts to creep in, and it's never really left. Think about the context again. This is 1948. The Cold War is just beginning. Australia had growing ties with US and British intelligence. And not far from Adelaide, there was Woomera, one of the most secretive military testing ranges in the world at the time. It was a place where weapons were being developed, where information was being guarded, and where quiet people came and went under assumed names. The man on the beach, he would fit that world in ways that were hard to ignore. He wasn't a drifter. He carried himself more like a man of culture, someone educated, somebody precise. He didn't have any identification, but he was connected to a rare book and a handwritten code. And what about the nurse, Jessica Thompson? Her unlisted phone number was found in that very book. Were her ties to the military, and were they there, even loosely? Or is this just coincidence? Or were there a piece of a puzzle that someone didn't want solved? Jessica never admitted to knowing the man. But when police showed her the plaster bust from his body, she visibly reacted. As we said, some officers said she nearly fainted. Others said she just went quiet. Either way, she denied everything. And that silence carried through the rest of her life. So over the years, theories have surfaced. Some speculated the man might have suffered from a rare medical condition, something that would not show up on an autopsy in 1948, but something that could still cause organ failure. Others thought he might have been a lost father or a man separated from his family by war or circumstance, someone who chose to vanish and died along the way. One theory even suggested he'd had a falling out with someone powerful and that his death was an act of quiet retribution. But none of these ideas can explain all the facts at once. The poison, or the absence of it, the secret scrap of poetry, the erased identity, the code, and the woman who wouldn't talk. All through all of this, no one, not a single person, ever stepped forward to say, I knew him. And that leaves the door open, wide open. Because if no one missed him, if no one claimed him, then who was he? Who sent them? And who silenced him? And why? In 2022, more than 70 years after the case first broke, a group of researchers said they had the answer. They identified the man as Carl Webb, a technician and instrument maker from Melbourne. It was a breakthrough made possible, of course, through forensic genealogy, this new science that we've talked about, solving old riddles. But even with a name, the questions only deepened. Why was Carl Webb in Adelaide? Why did he have a copy of the Rubaiyat? And why did he die on the beach, alone? Most importantly, who wanted him forgotten? Because that's the real mystery. Not just who he was, but who made him vanish and why. We asked Mia to take a hard look at the code, not to solve it, but to see what it could tell us under pressure. She started with structure. The code is short, too short to run full-scale statistical analysis, but patterns still reveal themselves. The second and fourth lines begin the same way. The last line is longer than the others, maybe a signature, maybe a conclusion. Letter frequency didn't line up with English. There were no markers for common substitutions, so that ruled out a basic cipher. So Mia shifted focus. What if it wasn't encryption in the traditional sense? What if the letters were initials? The first letter of every word, a thought or in a sentence, or something more personal. So she tested that idea against language models trained on historical writing, poetry, journals, telegrams, even suicide notes from the 1940s. And one phrase kept reappearing from the final line. If they take me, tell Sam and my sister to go abroad. Now, I'm not saying that's the answer, but that sentence has weight and it feels urgent. It sounds like someone trying to get a message across in the only way he could. And it fits the final moment. It fits a man who might have known something he wasn't supposed to. Mia also found that some letter clusters aligned with technical shorthand, the kind of wartime technician or electrical engineer might use. That got our attention too. Carl Webb, the man we now think was the Somerton Man, worked with instruments, with circuits. He may have been writing his own technical language, his own internal shorthand, but if that's the case, why hide it? You don't stitch a work note into your waistband. You do that when you want something seen but not easily understood, when the message is private or dangerous. That line of thinking, concealment rather than confusion, brought us to the next idea. If the book that held the code carried a Persian poem, and the phrase Tamam Shud was Persian, what if the code was too? Not written in Persian script, there was no Arabic lettering anywhere on the page. But what if the content itself had been Persian, transliterated, spelled out phonetically using the Latin alphabet? That was common in Western printings of Persian poetry at the time, and it would have made sense if the author, or Carl Webb, had read or written it that way. So we ran the test. We took lines from the Rubaiyat and other classical Persian quatrains, translated them into Latin characters, stripped them down to their phonetic roots, and compared the results to the original code. Nothing matched, not even close. Still, the structure wouldn't let go. 4 tight lines, one longer, a repeating phrase. There's a rhythm to the code. It mimics the form of a quatrain, the very structure Omar Khayyam used. That raised one final possibility. Maybe this wasn't a cipher at all. Maybe it was poetry. What if the message wasn't meant to be decrypted, but understood? Not with math, but with memory. Not by breaking it, by recognizing it. So we tried one more classical angle. Classic encryption. We fed the code into a Vigenère cipher using Tamam Shud as the key. It's a clean method, simple, elegant. And again, no full phrases emerged, but there were fragments. Repetitions, familiar shapes. It was just enough to leave us wondering. Mia didn't break the code, but she made one thing clear. This wasn't random. This wasn't the scrawl of a delusional mind or a meaningless puzzle. It was crafted. Somebody meant something by it. And maybe that someone believed or hoped that one day someone else would come along who could read it the way they intended. Not as a riddle, but as a farewell, an invitation to the public. We've reached the edge of what we know. A man was found dead on a beach in 1948, dressed well, prepared in some ways, stripped of identity in others. He left behind no name, no record, and no voice, just a line from a book, a handwritten code, and a story that refused to go away. Police couldn't solve it. The pathologist couldn't explain it. Intelligence services glanced at it and moved on. For more than 70 years, the rest of us have circled it, speculating it, arguing, wondering if maybe, just maybe, the answer was hiding in plain sight. We now believe his name was Carl Webb. That's something, it's a start. But a name isn't a motive or a reason, and it doesn't tell us why he came to Adelaide, why he carried that book, or what he meant when he tore out a final page and left 2 words behind. Tamam Shud, it is finished. And it doesn't tell us what the code means. We gave it to Mia and she did what she could, but sometimes even the smartest systems in the world need help from something simpler. A human voice, a new idea, or an unexplained connection that wasn't in the data. That's where you come in. I want you to take a shot at solving it. If you're watching this and something clicks, if you recognize a pattern, a phrasing, or a structure that feels familiar, write it down, record it, share it. Take a screenshot of the code, break it down, and tell us what you think it means. Use the hashtag Tamam Shud code and tag the show. We're watching, we're listening, and here it is, one more time. No one has solved it in 75 years, but maybe no one was asking the right people. Maybe that's you. We'll feature the most compelling submissions in an upcoming episode. Not just the polished ones, not just the ones that sound scientific. Sometimes it's the person with the weird theory that ends up being right. Sometimes it's the outsider who sees what the expert missed. If you think you have the answer, or even just a possibility, I want to hear it. Because this case isn't finished, not yet. The man on the beach left something behind, and for all we know, the person it was meant for never saw it, never got the chance. Now it's in your hands.